Gather, veterans. It's time to join the fight. The long war begins.
This is The Long War. I'm Rob Baer, and joining me once again are my partners in crime, Kenny Boucher, Mike Haspil, and Wyatt Turk. What's up, guys?
Yo, dog, great to be here.
Greetings and felicitations.
Yo, what's up?
I'm pretty sure Kenny told me not to rock in my chair, but I totally did this time.
No, I was watching. You slowed your roll and it didn't creak. I was like, thank God. If it had creaked, I would have lost my shit.
So actually, this is my old chair. I don't know if anybody cares or even noticed. I injured my back recently, so I went back to my old BMI chair. It's mantis sized.
What do you mean by BMI?
Yeah, that whole body mass
index. That's about your body. That's about how fat you are.
Yeah, I'm a fat kid sometimes, you know. But anyway, so this supposedly fits me, and it's kind of helped with all the stretching and meds and crying softly to myself. But yeah, so this actually isn't. It won't make that noise now that I think about it. So, but if this was that chair, I would have just effed up.
Oh my God, I would have been so mad.
So I'm glad we're back to square one. Yay!
So we're back. I'm back. You guys were here the whole time. And if you were wondering why there wasn't a podcast like last week, there was. It just didn't get pushed out to the feeds.
It was a live exclusive.
Mm-hmm. Do we need to fix that, by the way? So when Kenny's not here, it goes to all the channels, or do we care?
You guys should definitely do it to all the channels. That's the whole reason we have a restream.
We should talk about that. I don't know.
Okay.
Just like how to fix that.
You just log into that's right, because Wyatt doesn't use OBS Studio. He uses the Streamlabs one, and they might make him pay for a thing we already pay for.
Yeah, the Long War.
That was the thing you were talking about.
Yeah, the Long War account needs to upgrade to Prime on Streamlabs OBS.
So how many dollars is that?
It's like $20 a year or something. I don't know.
A year?
Yeah, it's really cheap.
Oh, well, we can probably find.
Yeah, I feel like I can find that.
Yeah, shit. Hold on. I've been doing a little side work here. I got some.
Yeah, $4 of the dollars.
How about this? Like, I'll go look up how much it is, and then I'll tell you how much money to give me, and I'll just pay it. Just
I might have
trust whatever I tell you.
I might have to do installments though, so like couch cushion installments.
Dude, I just found like $20 in ones underneath my desk. I don't know what I do here, but I have a lot of ones.
Or are you like a stripper werewolf? Where just like on the full moon, you change shape and then you go down to like hard bodies and get some ones or something.
That's how I blew out my back, apparently.
Oh,
just working it, you know, just working it. Girls got to eat, guys.
That's true.
It's been tough.
Boner pills aren't racking in the dough that they used to now that the lockdowns are going away, you know?
Dude, I had to do drive-thrus. Now we're going legit again, guys. Mm-hmm. We're rebranding again.
Yep. So today we're going to talk about the new exciting app. We're going to talk about the new floor rules from ITC, and I think Rob even has some good insight with the AOS Code of Conduct. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And I think Haspil's even got a legendary Haspil's Corner for us today. So that's the beginning show vocal table of contents. If you're listening to the podcast on your way to work and you're unable to actually click on any timestamps, but
please insert next disc.
Yeah.
There was a local game store here is doing a CD scatter terrain challenge. You know, because I guess you use the CD to make.
As long as it fits on a CD?
Yeah. And I walk up to the counter and I see the flyer and I'm like, what the F is a CD? Because I figured I would just...
You didn't rush home and undo the lock on your storage container of like 50,000 AOL dial-up CDs that you've hoarded since 1992?
But I knew like
Columbia House.
the very first person that is younger or whatever is gonna come up and be like, "What's the CD?" So I had a troll, and it was just like, got him.
You beat me to the joke. I'm so glad you said it though. Rob does have a drawer full of AOL.com CDs that he got from the post office for free in the 90s.
That's yeah. I mean, everybody was doing it. It's not my fault.
Yeah, but you still have them. That is your fault. Wyatt, would you please take us on a wonderful journey and roll out to Wyatt's Cave of Wonders?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Would you rather get into a snowball fight with a major league pitcher or a pillow fight with a heavyweight boxer?
I thought the last part of that was going to go a completely different way.
It didn't.
Yeah. You threw me off.
Normal. Is it like, so it's a pillow fight. Catch me up on like, what are the rules of a pillow fight? What, like, how does someone win a pillow fight?
Yeah.
I guess when you get, you're like, stop. I don't want to do this.
Is this going to be ref stoppage here or can I just tap out?
I feel like you just tap out. I think that's fair.
I'll definitely have to take one of these pillows though. I feel like I'm more equipped to take a pillow really hard than a fucking 90 mile an hour, snowball.
Nobody has ever gotten concussed from just a honest to goodness pillow fight. I don't think.
Oh, I can tell you a story about yes, there has.
Oh, wow.
I feel like if you don't concede quick enough, you could die in a pillow fight for sure. Like I for sure could kill you, Rob, with a pillow. Like no doubt. If you were dumb enough to
If you smothered me with a pillow, maybe.
And he's going to take that pillow and ball it up and shove it into the pillowcase so it turns into a freaking flail.
Dude, why you gotta angle shoot this? Like, come on, man. It's just a pillow fight. It's just a pillow fight, man.
It's going to be a concentrated ball of like duck feathers that's solid. For all intents.
I'm going to pull the pillow out. I'm going to take a leak on it, soak it, roll it up into a ball, put it back in the case.
Freeze it.
Fucking turn it into a mace. But I'm just saying this is a fucking would you rather pillow fight. This isn't a normal pillow fight.
Yeah, it's like you have to like think about it being like just poof, you're now in an arena. A man hands you a pillow. Across from you is a heavyweight boxer who is also holding a pillow. And you have to fight now. I'm
doing the pillow fight 100%.
Pillow fight 100%.
Yeah,
I don't need a broken orbital from a freaking snowball. 100 mile an hour snowball into the dome. I don't need that.
I've been involved with some serious snowball engagements in my time, and that shit gets real cool wick.
That's what I'm saying. But none of them have the accuracy of a fucking major league baseball player. Nor the speed.
And sometimes because you figure, they just straight bean it at you. But it seems like it was in snowball fights. It's always the ones that go up and then they get that like perfect trajectory to just like smash into you. Those are the worst.
Rob, who hurt you? Like, what is these?
Apparently snowball.
What is this snowball Vietnam?
He grew up in New York. See, the thing is, people in chat, if you don't understand snow, you've got, a good old fashioned snowball fight where you got the fluffy dry snow. That's fine. Snow. If you throw it too hard, it just explodes into confetti. It's not a problem. But if you live in New York, like what Rob did,
there's this thing called lake effect snow.
It is.
You can see Rob's eyes
completely different.
He can hear the Hueys hovering.
Like the second you take that snow,
they're all playing Wagner.
You pack it one time in your hand, it might as well be a fucking rock.
Yeah,
Rob is hearing "Fortunate Son" in the background.
Yeah, Wagner and "Fortunate Son." Yeah, dude, she got. It gets real. It gets real up north, man. You just don't. You don't want. You guys don't know.
Yeah, and I feel. Yeah, I'm aware. Like I'm not trying to get hit by one of those.
Nope. I'm down with some pillows.
But somebody in chat did ask a hilarious question, and I'm trying to see if I can find it because it was relevant to the heavyweight boxer. Here we go. I think it's Tactical Pacifier. Are you in pajamas with the boxer you're pillow fighting? Like, are we both wearing PJs?
I mean, I don't see how that's relevant, but it's relevant. If that's part of if that's part of the thing that gets you going, then sure.
I find it to be relevant information.
I mean, yeah, man. If you wanna get in there and fight in pajamas, go for it.
I want a full immersion.
I think we are talking about like just your standard down pillow, not memory foam pillows, not.
Oh, those are dense.
Yeah, those would break you.
Yeah, those will.
But there's the other side too. I mean, if I remember correctly, and I could be completely wrong, but if I remember correctly, the Boston Massacre started because colonists were throwing snowballs at the Brits.
Sounds like that was up north.
That's not Boston snow. You see what I'm saying?
That would be in Boston, and that would be that Boston killer death snow.
Maybe that's why Rob has some PTSD about this. He was there.
He was there.
He was there. He remembers it.
So I feel like if the snowballs can drive like the soldiers to open up on an unarmed crowd, that's some serious snowballs.
That wasn't ready.
He's getting the old flashbacks right now. I see it. So
I could be completely.
It was a firefight.
One dude with six guns.
All right.
Spoiler alert.
Well, Rob, you're doing pillow fight obviously because you're PTSD. Universal pillow fight. Good, solid. Absolutely. Would you rather? Rob, why don't you do some news? Memorial desk time.
No pillows involved. We saw earlier in the week the final prototype from our friends and our much discussed company name Joy Toy, the Infiltrator action figures. And I think they have incursors too, all painted up, super articulate, looking dope. I think the one incursor was like pulling his combat knife, holding. It looked really good.
They do look really good. The paint job on them looks.
Yeah,
I think what they were going for was like, we want these to look like the miniatures from like the display ads and box art, and they did a pretty good job. Like, yeah, they look good.
And apparently, you can get the set of figures. Normally, they're around $30, and they do like a set for like $120 or something. It's all pending final approval from GW, but hopefully, we see that in the near future because. I was excited about McFarlane figures, because I love Spawn back in the day. I bought a lot of their figures, and it was just cool to have. Like, I just put them on the shelf and stuff. But I think like action figures, like G.I. Joe size, like, those I'll actually probably play with. Like, pew pew. Didn't see you playing with the action figures again, sir. And then we also saw at the Winter Festival in Shanghai, I think it was Winterfest. I forget the exact name of it, but there are in the wild, we don't know exactly what they are, or if they will be offered some Grey Knight action figures that look more on par with like the McFarlane offering. And one of them looked like he was Drago.
Yeah, well,
he was Drago.
Looked super sexy.
I want to know how big they are because I like right now I'm looking at 4 Dread Knights, and if they're the right size, I will throw these in the garbage.
They're about McFarlane size because you can see somebody's in the picture. You can see somebody's torso behind them. That's the only thing we really have to go for scale.
Well, they may be a little big, but
they look about McFarlane.
Yeah, they'd be really cool.
They're really cool.
But the good thing about, if they're McFarlane size, I don't know what their pricing is, but McFarlane at $20, $20 is $20.
Yeah.
When it comes to G-Dub, it's basically free.
Yeah.
At this point in time. So
let's see. Because I think what's their Dread Knight? 51 retail. Most stores are 51. So that's like a little over 200. So for 4 of them, it'd be 80.
Yeah.
Pretty good conversion for a way cooler looking Dread Knight.
I'm definitely on board with some of that.
Somebody in chat says they're only 10 centimeters tall. Don't know how truthful that is, but we'll see.
That doesn't sound right.
That's still 4 inches. The Grey Knight ones? I don't know.
It definitely is exactly 4 inches.
Well, now you know what your metric conversion is, Kenny.
Unfortunately, I already knew that. I'm really familiar with that one.
The GW tape measures have millimeters and all right. Anyways, we'll definitely have more to say about that. Some new products this week. Obviously, it's an off week for GW. The Dominion went up for pre-order on and all the AOS stuff, the rule books, the objectives, the tokens, the books, the limited stuff. A lot of it's still available. Most of the limited stuff was still available. Dominion's still available. They kind of let it slip that there was roughly 33,000 copies globally available on their web store. So interesting numbers. You might remember we talked about Indominus, and the rumor was there was 30,000. So in theory, GW made more of their limited run AOS flagship product than they did of their limited run 40K flagship product. And we talked about it in the pregame. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about it right now in their heads. Yes, you could make the argument that AOS is not as popular as 40K. So it seems kind of weird that they produced that much. I don't know, but they're still available. So if you want a box set of Dominion, they are up and available right meow. And you can still get the tokens, the command tokens, which I think are the sweet metal, and they come in a little display box and stuff. So pretty cool in general. So always, vote with your hobby dollars or buy at your local game store.
What are the tokens for? Just like for tracking things?
Basically command points.
Oh, okay.
The Sigmar equivalent.
Word, got it.
Yep.
Makes sense. I used to use tokens. I remember now, it's been a while. I used to use tokens too for my command points, and now I use like my phone.
Yeah, if you're not using the ITC app thing, get on board on that.
Yeah, that shit is
good.
ITC battles.
ITC battles. It is not. It is not affiliated with Frontline or GW, but it is solid tracking app. And it keeps metrics of all your games too, so you can figure out how you did against a certain army, or if you went, how many times you win, if you will go first or if you go second. Does all that.
I got introduced to that recently, and yep.
Peep it.
That is definitely the good stuff. Not a whole lot on the new product, like actually available for sale. That's dope this week, but. There's been some previews from Creature Caster. They have a new tiny Malefica demon coming out. It looks pretty dope. And some other pre-order offerings that they may offer through their web store if they get enough orders on it. I think it was the Australian Chimera. It looked pretty funny. And there's also a murder drop bear that will be part of it. Just cool little weird stuff that Creature Caster is always great at kind of making really just doing their little Creature Caster thing with it. I think it's always
I'm a big fan of their tokens.
Yeah.
The tokens on their Kickstarter blew my mind.
The actually resin ones are super dope. Way better than like the cardboard stuff that would come with the base version of the game. But moving on to hobby supplies, it looks like Monument Hobbies came out with a line of Pro Sable brushes, which is actually really kind of hard to get right now because, there's been a kind of a shortage on sable hair. They had to put down a lot of animals that produce it because, the cross-contamination jumping of species from COVID. So it's been rough out there. I mean, even GW kind of switched to synthetic for right now because at the scale they need, it almost be impossible to do it. So this might be a thing that you want to jump on. The sets are like $49, and they have some big poofy round dry brushes too that are synthetic, but for dry brushing and stuff, you don't need it. You don't need a sable hair.
Yeah, I mean, it's like usually it's either synthetic or like goat hair.
Yeah. And I mean, technically synthetic, by the nature of the material, it won't cause as much like brush strokes in what you're painting and stuff. But, obviously people.
They're both good. Synthetic, you need to dry it more because they're less porous typically.
They will get wrecked if you let stuff dry on it.
So, yeah.
But
they're both good. It's it's makeup brush tech. Like all the brushes you see if you go to a Sephora and you just like snag a bunch of those are all synthetic. Like, and we all know that that's tech,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pretty good. I'm looking forward to those.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be. I look very forward to checking them out. And we had some rumors. We haven't even seen a new Age of Sigmar 3.0 hit the shelves yet. But the rumor out there of the next battle tomes to come out after, of course, the Oruks and the Stormcast are supposedly going to be Maggotkin, which kind of makes sense because they haven't had a book since the last edition of 2.0 came out right around then. Gloomspite Gitz also came out right around the last rules set around January of 2018. No, it'd be 19, January 2019. And then also the Ogres and Beasts of Chaos. So it does really seem like GW is kind of starting to focus on more of the destruction side of things, which is kind of like the Xenos equivalent, I guess, in Sigmar, because a lot of people are like, oh, Xenos don't get no love and 40K. But it seems like on the Sigmar side of things, people are always like destruction, we're not getting new models, not getting new books, which is kind of true. But they seem to be ready to focus on them in one of the Chaos factions in the near future, which is, for those players, that's pretty dope. So, and the other thing that came out too, and we'll talk about this here in a second, was the ITC Code of Conduct for that. It's 15 pages long, but I thought we would go over the Sigmar ones real quick because they have just a little player's code in the actual new Sigmar rules book, which I think all the points, me and Haspil are kind of going over these. I think we're pretty, they're all pretty good. And Haspil has said he has some growing to do on one of these, but
I do. I'll admit it.
Do you have the list in front of you, or do you want me to?
I do not have the list in front of me. I'm sorry.
All right, I'll go it down. So cardinal rules: always be polite and respectful. Always tell the truth and never cheat. That is like right underneath the player's code, and then it goes into principles. There's not too many. Arrive on time with all the things you need to play the game. Makes sense. Make a respectful gesture to your opponent before and after the game, such as offering a handshake, wishing them good luck, etc.
Handies and hugs, baby.
Or before game mint. Would you like a mint? I always like to lead with that. Or gum. Avoid using language your opponent might find offensive.
Shit. Handies and hugs might.
No more handies.
That means you can't say like Magnus did nothing wrong at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, I mean, depends.
You're right. Some people, that is a hard line. Yeah. That's a hard stance.
Mm-hmm. Ask your opponent's permission if you wish to use unpainted models or substitute models.
Oh, cool. That's what counts as. And they...
Yeah.
Or alternates or whatever you want to call it. Offer your opponent a chance to examine your army roster before the battle starts. Answer any questions your opponent has about your army and the rules that apply to your army. Now, I think answering questions is good, but going over every single rule, I don't know.
No, it doesn't say that. It says answer any questions they might have.
Yeah. It's like, hey, man, what does this guy do?
It also ties into the first one. It says always tell the truth. So no omission. So if I say, I'm not saying if the guy's a dick if he says, now I want you to recite to me all the rules of your army while I listen. No, that's ridiculous. But if he asks you a question, answer it truthfully.
Yep. Measure moves and distances carefully and accurately. Give your opponent the chance to examine your dice rolls before picking up the dice. I think we could all learn something from that.
No, those were sixes. That's what that was.
Absolutely.
I saw them.
Yep. Ask permission before touching any of your opponent's miniatures. I think that just goes without saying.
You got to be eating Cheetos too, like right before. And then, hey man, can I look at your mini? That's a good paint job.
And instead of going to wash your hands, you brush them off on your pants because then they're clean.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this. Remind your opponent about rules they may have forgotten to use or they have used incorrectly, especially when doing so. Doing so is to your own opponent's advantage rather than your own.
Spirit, that's principles, right? That's what they're calling.
Yep. Oh. Never deliberately waste time during a game. Avoid distracting your opponent when they are trying to concentrate, and be careful to respect their personal space.
Oh, that's
no more hugs or handies.
Damn, no. I'm starting to feel really attacked by this one, Haspil.
Well, that was 3. Remember back in the day, that was like a pet peeve of mine.
I know.
You came over to my side of the table.
I know.
and you'd crowd me out.
I fucking know. Okay, I played the Blood Angels in these interactions, and I was the recipient of many of a indirect yet directed pontification sessions of like, you know, what one of my biggest pet peeves in 40K is when someone spends all their time on my side of the table as I'm like staying on this side of the table,
crowding me out, and it's not like Kenny and I are small people.
I just like sit there. I'm just like, you better be real comfortable with a lot of stuff real fast. You're in my personal bubble, and what goes down here may not be what you're thinking.
You might not be used to what happens down here.
Yeah, what you don't want none of that. You got to ask. You don't know. Never complain about your bad luck or your opponent's good luck.
Yep. Directly called out. It actually says Mike Haspil right after that.
It does.
There's an arrow pointing to me.
Yep.
Which Haspil does go on and on and on about all the ones he rolls. But being a guy who's been playing 40K with this guy for like, 16 years or some shit, man? God damn.
Yeah.
2004 or some shit? How many years is that? I can't do that kind of math.
It's a good thing you don't keep track.
I've been there.
But yeah, that's something I'm trying to grow. That's what I meant by I need growth. I'm trying to get better at that. And it's not just in 40K. It's any game I play that involves dice. Ironically, it doesn't bother me in D&D because then it becomes like funny that you're like, oh, I just boned that roll. Something hilarious is about to happen.
And the last one is never fix the outcome of a game.
No collusion.
No collusion.
Solid, concise, to the point. Good job, GW.
I think they're all very, very good.
I mean, you can probably just be like, this could be just rules to live your life by. Don't touch people's dicks. Don't whine all the time about how bad luck is or some shit. You know, like, got it. It's good. I'm gonna model my life after those. Don't
do worse.
Don't hold me to the standard, though. I will absolutely fail.
Haspil, I was supposed to lead in to you with something, and I forgot.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
Haspil's corner.
Haspil, it's your turn.
Okay, so I got a couple of things we got to knock out of the way first. First of all, I ordered that Vincula Insurgency Super Collector's Edition.
Oh, for the Gaunt's Ghosts.
Yes, and that came today, and it is dope and it's super money, and I got 2 of them. So if you are somehow listening to this show and your name is Paul and you live in Maryland, I have yours. I'm going to send it back. So I need to call GW customer service. They were already closed today, to find out if they want me to just mail it direct, or because the invoice inside the box was correct, but the box had my address on it. So just wanted to get that out of the way. I'm not keeping the other copy. That would be pretty raunchy move. The other thing is that, LibertyCon is kicking off this weekend. It is completely free. They have some really good like writer track stuff. They have a STEM track. They have a gaming and an art track. All this stuff.
What's a STEM track?
A STEM, science, technology, engineering, math.
How would I know that, Mike?
I don't know.
He went to Florida. Those words mean nothing to him.
He went to Florida.
He's from Florida.
He went to Florida.
Apparently, I went to Florida too. It changes people.
I was there very recently.
Happening?
You're right. I was just there. I'm still decompressing, and it's coming back to me. I have heard of this term now that you mentioned
It's like you stepped into the quantum leap accelerator and vanished.
But yeah, I'll throw the link in the chat there. And the reason I'm talking about it is I'm on a couple panels there. But I'm going to be doing a reading tomorrow night from my new story, the penultimate stand of Pina Gracchi, at, I think it's 8 Mountain Time, so 10 p.m. Eastern. And that will be actually on Discord. So when you go to their website, all the Discord invites to their servers, to the Discord server is on there. It is completely free. I think you just need to like create an account in Evenity. I think that's what it's called, that website. But there are links to it all and everything. And that'd be cool. So Anyway,
So-
they have lots of great tracks and really cool stuff going on.
I didn't give a shit about this until you told me you were doing a fucking reading.
Yeah, so I'm going to probably read. Well, I know I'm going to read from that story, and I'm going to read from Graveyard Shift.
Are you gonna? Do you know which ones? You already know which chapters you're reading?
I do not for Graveyard Shift, but they gave me an hour. I'm like, dude,
You should definitely read that one chapter.
and then everyone will be like, this guy's a psycho. He is. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to read that one chapter. That's chapter 4. That's the make or break chapter. If you make it past that chapter, you should get a badge.
That's the polarizing moment of the book.
Well, there's lots of them, but that's the one where people put it down.
Well, that's the one when you see a review, it's like couldn't get past or didn't like, or that moment. So yeah,
it's that moment.
Don't read that
chapter. It's like back in the day when you went to go see Faces of Death. If you sat through the whole movie, they gave you like a little certificate. I should start doing that. If you made it past chapter 4, you get a certificate.
Nice. I would definitely want one of those.
But yeah, I wanted to talk to folks about the best Warhammer 40K computer game you are not playing. And it's because it hasn't been released yet. It's called Battle Sector. And you're playing the Blood Angels against Tyranids, and the demo is out. Ooh. So I want to just kind of describe to people what you can expect when you get the demo. The tutorial is a hot mess. So do not judge the game from the tutorial. In fact, the tutorial is buggy. It has a game-breaking bug in it. If you choose to empower the Hormagaunts, it just crashes. It just doesn't work from that point on. So don't do that when you're going through. And the tutorial is really, really simple. It's just teaching you how to move stuff, how to attack stuff, everything. The 2 campaign missions that are attached with the demo are incredible. And yes, it's a turn-based Warhammer 40K strategy game, which a lot of people hate, but I would almost say this is halfway between turn-based and an RTS. It's because most turn-based games, when you select a unit, you have to do whatever you're going to do with that unit until you can move on to another one, right? This uses a movement point and an action point system. So action points are what you would use for shooting. Movement is what you would use for moving. Pretty simple, but you don't have to do them in any particular order. So when you select a unit, you could shoot first, you could then move. And then if you have action points left over, shoot again. And vice versa.
Or you can move all your guys into the optimized positions and then decide.
And then go through and shoot. Yeah. And here's what's really cool that I think that they did that makes it kind of that halfway mark between an RTS and turn-based is you don't have to wait until that unit that you just told to move finishes its move before it moves to the next unit. So you can just go,
that's a pet peeve
click
of mine.
on this guy, move there, click on this guy, move there, click on this guy, move there, and all your guys will move all at once or shoot all at once or whatever.
So you don't have to like sit through a long ass animation pull. Like,
yeah. So it's almost more like Total War in that sense, except I don't want to compare it to that because people are expecting these massive battles and it's really not like that. It's more, it reminded me the most of Sanctus Reach, which I think is one of the best. It's an underrated computer game for 40K with Sanctus Reach. It's really, really solid. And honestly, this Battle Sector, we know that they're releasing sisters for it already. And I think if they released, DLC with all the factions, they would have a solid hit on their hands. Now, granted, that's just based on the demo and playing 2 missions, but I've played those 2 missions like 4 times. Just those 2 missions, just messing around with stuff, seeing what different things I can do. And it has different objectives in there too, like your sanguinary priest has to run around and collect gene seed. It's actually really, really cool. Very well done. Soundtrack is pretty good too. So check out the demo if you want it. It's pretty cool. It comes out July 15th, I think the actual game launches, and it's like a $30 game. It's not, AAA. $60 title.
Steam,
and I think Slytherin. That's the publisher. Has it on their website too. Then. Yeah, because they did Armageddon, they did Sanctus Reach, they did Gladius. And I think there's one other one out there, but they're pretty good.
Hell yeah. I'm in. So we're going to now come back to the floor rules that Rob alluded to earlier. So you've already heard this AOS really concise set of codes of conduct. And I guess the big heat is that we've got 15 pages of updated conduct rules. We deliberately chose not to talk about too much about the new GW app today. It seems like everyone's already kind of talked about it. It's the opinion seems to be shockingly and overwhelmingly positive, which I agree with and we agree with. But let's kick it over to Wyatt. Wyatt, walk us through some of the hot takes. We're not going to read them all. It's 15 fucking pages.
Yeah. I mean, so for the most part, this code of conduct is just the same. It's just they added in a lot of clarifications, a lot of examples, things like that. But we did get some big changes. And I would say probably the biggest overall change is they have reworked the penalty system with yellow cards and what those mean. And some of those have to do with like the list thing, like submitting on time, lists being valid, things being listed like relics, war gear, psychic powers, roller traits, all that stuff, right? So I'm just going to go over that real quick and just read from this so that we all get it right the first time, right? So yellow cards are an indication a foul has taken place. The yellow card is accompanied by an appropriate penalty, such as the removal of victory points for the offending player. The player may only accrue one yellow card during an event. If they receive a second yellow during the event, it becomes a red card, and an appropriate penalty for receiving a red card is applied. A player who receives an additional yellow or red card after a first red card is automatically disqualified from the event. And then they go on to say that certain things associated with gaining a red card or a yellow card are also punitive in removal of points. So, for example, incorrectly submitting a list, submitting an incorrect list, or failing to meet the submission deadline, you take a negative 20-point deficit on your first game round. And then other things like unsportsmanlike conduct, 20 points. Dice infraction, 10 points.
Dice infraction, 20 points is going to be an interesting and highly enforceable one, because I think that's been a lot of controversy lately. Like, the most recent scandal with TJ Lanigan. Interesting to see how that would play out, with a proactive enforcement of these types of rules. Like, if it would just be like yellow card for this, then 20 points for that, 20 points for this. Like minus 60 points plus a yellow card. Like, kind of interesting to see how that plays out. That makes sense.
I think, I think there's a lot of rules in there, like intent, like don't touch, like the whole don't touch your dice until you're ready to do something. And it all kind of makes sense. But, first of all, you got to get a judge over there.
Yeah, it's going to be about, it's about proactive enforcement, right?
Events have been getting so much better about having, a good number of judges, like people on staff, and like those judges being proactive and being there. Got to give a shout out to like Dallas Open and ACO and some of these other events that have been going on where like judges have been like real on the ball, doing their job. But I think it's actually a really good thing that they're doing these actual punitive measures for these cards. And what I mean by that is that for a really long time, well, not a super long time, but for the past couple of years that we've had this yellow card, red card system, many times a yellow card didn't mean anything. Like it was not really a punitive measure in any case. Like you could get a yellow card and still win an event. Many people did. You could not submit your list on time, get a yellow card. And then as long as you didn't do anything else wrong, like you were cool. And then it was like you had to get 3 yellow cards to achieve that red card to get DQ'd, where it's like, okay, somebody could get a yellow card in their first game and they could get one in their second game. And then as long as they don't do anything else, they could still go on and win an event. Right. And that rubbed people the wrong way, which it should have, because it's not cool. Right. Whereas now it's just like, if you do these things, you're going to take not only that yellow card, which is way closer to getting you DQ'd, but also like you're going to get those points taken away, and that could lose you the game.
Yep.
Quickly.
Good change.
Negative 20 points is tough to come back from just off the get-go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then one of the things that we talked about in the pre-show was they have a whole section on decorum. There's a couple of things that we want to talk about, but probably this big one, it's the very first bullet in the decorum section. And it says, a player may never take an action that would put the hobby of Warhammer in disrepute. And initially when this came out, a lot of people were like, well, what does that mean? What is, like, this is so broad, it's undefined. Like, what does this even mean? And some people may have made this association like I did, but immediately when I saw that, I thought of something that's very analogous in other types of contracts, like with like if you're an actor or a TV personality, radio host, even a writer like Haspil, it's something called a morality clause. There might be other words for it, but it's a very broad and undefined rule that's part of this contract, so that if you do something that isn't specific to a stipulation laid out in this code of conduct, it gives the judges the autonomy to basically dole out punitive measures, even if it's not covered, because it's impossible to cover every single interaction in a rules document like this, because, you know, somebody could do something, they're like, oh, that's not in the code of conduct. What do we do? Like, we can't punish them. There's no rule. They didn't break any rule. Well, now there's this morality clause, for lack of a better term. And I think this is great because it might just be something where somebody maybe they're just having like a really bad attitude, or maybe they do something that may not be at a tournament, but does in fact like harm the community in a way that lets these governing bodies dole out punitive measures.
I can think of an example actually that has shown up in writing circles and will actually carry over to 40K or Warhammer in general, gaming, right? And it's heavy drinking. Because that goes hand in hand, right? At writers' conferences, people used to drink a lot. I mean, writers have been known to imbibe a lot of alcohol, and so do gamers.
So, a really good example.
So it's like, hey, you're going to need to, I'm not saying not have beers or whatever when you're playing, but maybe don't be that guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, most of these events happen in venues that are shared with people that are not attending our events, like hotels or different resorts. If we're talking about like Las Vegas Open or something like that. And if you're like being that guy where you're being a really loud, belligerent drunk, other people are seeing that and they're associating you with the Warhammer community.
That's a good point, Mike. Yeah. It's like, you basically need a catch that says everything we've listed in this document isn't the limit of the rules, right? AKA this one. It's I like that. It's because with active judging, they need to be able to fall back on to the document that they wrote and not be accused of going off document. And now that this is there, that's awesome.
There was another section in this decorum section. Some people were like, oh, what is this? I haven't seen this before. And it talks about angle shooting. This is a term that some people may have heard before.
Yeah. Where does that come from?
I believe.
So anecdotally, I've heard it used by players from the East Coast. Like I've heard Sean Naden and some other players talk about this before. And it's just like angle shooting. It's basically an analogy or a slang term for somebody that's like doing some shady shit, right? And so it says a player may never engage in angle shooting. Angle shooting, which is defined as the act of using various underhanded, unfair methods to take advantage of inexperienced opponents. What an angle shooter does may be marginally or technically legal, but it's neither ethical nor sportsmanlike. Angle shooting is strictly against the spirit of the game, which they have a whole section on, and constitutes unsportsmanlike conduct. Angle shooting is a serious break of decorum and will result in a yellow card plus a penalty of no less than 10 victory points. Angle shooting, depending upon the egregiousness of the incident, can be grounds for an automatic red card, with either a round DQ or an event DQ at the judges/TO's discretion.
That's
Catch me outside.
I like that because they escalate that right at the end. Like I'm listening to it. I'm like, oh, they acknowledge it's not possibly technically cheating.
Yeah, I mean, like this. So that last statement, right, where they say that like TOs have some discretion to do certain things. That's another term that's been used multiple times in this document, where like upon the TO's discretion, if a player were to do something that may normally be a yellow card or something that is a little bit less defined, or the egregiousness of an act, they can just basically be like, you have a red card now, or you're out.
They can decide that like this version of angle shooting was on the lighter side of it and be like, well, 20 points. Don't do it again. Or they can be like, that was, get out of here.
Yeah, it was real bad. Yeah.
So I mean, I think Haspil ran us through some cool analogies earlier, like, because as we try to define this concept of like, you know, well, what would it be? Like, what interaction are we talking about? Am I required to like constantly disclose every element of my army so I don't get accused of this? Or is it, what is it? So Haspil, you had some analogies with measurement, movement, and assaults.
Yeah, I was just, I was thinking of like a scenario, right? Where there used to be, and I don't even know if this still exists, there used to be like a strategy for Wolfen that allowed them to move like twice, right? So if you see somebody, say you're playing that, right? And you see somebody deploying right on the 12-inch line. And you know, I've deployed my Wolfen on the 12-inch line, and they've deployed right on the edge of their deployment zone, right? And I know I can catch them, but I can also tell that this guy doesn't know that, right? So he asks a question like, "Hey man, how far can those Wolfen move?" Right? And I tell him, and these are old rules. I don't know what the new rules are, but it's like, "Hey, I can move and I can charge you after I advance." Right? So I've told him that. So he has a reference for a certain danger range that he's like, well, I'm still safe, right? But I neglected to tell him that, say, I have a stratagem that allows me to move twice, which would totally make a first turn charge possible and wreck him. And I can see that he's deployed in a manner that is going to be to my total advantage because he doesn't have that piece of information. So I don't know that that's actually angle shooting. But
I think it is because you didn't cheat.
Definitely.
You answered his question exactly with no.
Exactly. I didn't tell him like, hey, but I also have the stratagem that lets me move twice.
And you observed him knowingly that he thought he was defending against that.
Right.
That distance. Right.
Yeah.
He might even been saying it like, oh, okay, I'll go with average die roll 3. Okay, I'll budget it 4.5 inches from that advance. Okay, cool, got it. And you just watch him do this whole thing, knowing the whole time you're going to just pay a 2 CP and get him
and do that, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of messed up. And so you should probably give the person, hey, you know, I have a stratagem that allows me to move twice, and maybe that person's like, look, I think I'm going to be able to go first. And your Wolfen aren't going to be there, so I don't need to worry about them. You know, I'm going to destroy them.
It's a good point because it is technically not cheating. You are, but you know, like, and they even say that in angle shooting. It's, you know, but it's straight up against the spirit of sportsmanship and conduct. When, you know, like it takes advantage 100%. Like, and I think earlier when we were in a pregame show, we went real deep on it. We had a lot of viewer interactions and stuff like that, a lot of different perspectives on it. But I think the thing that it came back to was like, ultimately, like, what kind of win do you want? Do you want wins based on, you know, deliberately omitting things so that you can have an advantage when needed? Or do you want to win and like on a playing field that is equal and honorable? Like, so do you just want W's or do you want like things you earned?
Right. Because it's like we know the game is so vast right now. It's so big that it's virtually impossible to know what every army can do.
Oh, for sure.
And so you need to cooperate with your opponent and just be like, hey, you know, it's pretty clear you don't know what this can do. Now, Kenny had a good example too, where he was just like at the beginning of the game, when he's like going over his army, he'll be like, hey, this particular guy carries this relic that does this.
And I'll be like, this is that thing. You've heard of it. It real bad.
You've heard of it. It's going to wreck you. So pay attention.
So I draw my own line. I have now felt comfortable that I provided my opponent with the information that he needs, and I went above and beyond to be like, hey.
Well, yeah, because then that's their opportunity to be like, no, wait, how's that work again? It does this.
Right.
This.
So now
I'll spend 10 minutes walking him through it on my clock.
In turn 2, he decides to assault that guy holding that relic that you warned him about in pregame. And gets faded. That's his fault. He made a mistake.
Yeah, and if he looks at me like, hey, I didn't know it did that. Like, I'm like, look, I told you, I'm very comfortable with this interaction. I put him there hoping that you would have to be in a situation where you had to charge it. Like, so there is an individual line that needs to be defined of like, you know what you fucking did. Like, I know that I did not mislead this man, right? And so, and this is funny because this also goes back to the AOS conduct rules where it says like, you have to answer all questions asked about your rules. That GW has established that too in that code of conduct. Like, if I look you in the eyes, Mike, and I ask you a question, and it says in the first one was always be truthful in the player's conduct. So if I look you right in the eyes and you omit something, omission is lying.
Yeah. Lie of omission is a lie.
And so like you omitted that from me. You broke the first code of conduct and then like the fourth principle code of conduct. Like you were not truthful and you did not answer my question. So like, it's crazy how like these are somewhat parallel here, like very, brief descriptors that we have to talk about versus very detailed like scenarios like that play out. Like I'm big fan.
And like we were talking about earlier, if you point out a mistake like that, right, to somebody and in a tournament, a lot of times, and you give them the opportunity, like, hey, you really don't want to deploy there, right? Because I can get you. Right. A lot of times the person will just be like, nah, man, I realized that was a mistake. I forgot to do that. Or I didn't roll for this, or I got to learn. I'm not going to take it back. Right. So it just makes for a better game. And if you do know something, right, it's like, let's say this, and this is not really an angle thing. It's just sportsmanship. If you're fighting their HQ or whatever, and he just gets killed in combat and dies straight away, right? You might be like, hey man, don't you have a stratagem that allows your characters to like fight twice before they die?
That's sportsmanship. That's good sportsmanship.
Yeah. You can just throw that out. And he might be like, yeah, I need the CP for something else. Or he'd be like, oh yeah, thank you. Right. Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that is lost in the community, and again, like Haspil, I always think of you because of how many single player games you play. But also you love wargaming because of the social interaction. And it's like, you guys got to remember, like, sportsmanship, like I define it. There's a lot of definitions for it, but mine is like equally invested in my opponent's time. And the reason I define it that way is because I always feel honored when someone is willing to like spend man hours on something that I feel like I'm very indulgent in my time on the table. Like this is like, I'm very selfish with it. This is my time. Right. So I also take a step back and realize like, since I love this so much, I have to really respect the fact that that guy is willing to stand in front of me for 3 hours and let me have this right now. And so I try to give that back to him. And we're a community. We're friends. We see each other at all the events. We talk online. You start to really alienate yourself from this greater community when you start angle shooting every tournament you go to, every game you play. And eventually you're not going to have any friends left who are willing to stand in front of you for 3 hours, 15 seconds.
Kind of segues a little bit into another one of the other big changes in that they added a whole section about teams and clubs. And so they say that like teams and clubs are like interchangeable as a term for this. And based on the conduct of players within a team or a club, like if they're having issues, the team or club itself can be issued a label that is sometimes a lead up to punitive measures against the organization. And it's long. So like it's not like word salad, but it explains a lot. So I won't go into it word for word, but that is a kind of a big deal. So just in the past, we've had issues with clubs like Team Happy that have done shit, habitual line steppers, if you will. They got some, punitive measures. And some other teams and organizations where they've had, multiple people from that organization at an event, and like 2 players from that team got yellow cards or something at an event, things like that. So like, I'm really glad they put this in there because, teams and clubs are becoming more popular as the like competitive scene.
Yeah, there's a ranking system and there's prestige attached to it. One of those elements of the ranking system is your team's, overall success in the ITC. So yeah.
I heard the label is excommunicate traitorous. Is that true? Can you confirm that?
Well, it's a warning. It's on watch.
Is it the team happy clause?
And super secret probation.
Super secret probation.
Oh, so it's not going to be publicly disclosed. They're just putting them on their own watch list.
That was just a reference to a movie that came out.
Pop culture reference. Okay,
I like it.
I mean, that's an important step to take. What about something that I think is really important, because now that Haspil is in on the chess clock team chess clock. I heard that they outlined some more procedure with running out of time.
Yeah, there's a whole section on chess clocks and the rules for using them, like when the time starts, when the time ends, who's allowed to actually ever like pause the clock, because sometimes players have been like a little laissez-faire about like pausing the clock, and so like they go into detail on that, and they also go into how like each player is responsible for their own time and only a judge can pause the clock. Like what constitutes being on your clock. It's like they well define that, those sort of things. So that's another one where it's very easy to read through, but there's a lot of it. So you should just read it on your own time and be aware of those changes. Because there's a number of like small changes, some of these larger changes that we've gone over, but a lot of it is like clarification and examples that people should be aware of. So it's like 15 pages seems like a lot, but it's like a Google Doc, so it's not actually like 15 real pages. It's like 6, maybe even less. Pretty easy to get through.
Double space.
Yeah, most of it's like very common sense type stuff. So it's like none of this stuff is going to be super surprising.
I was surprised.
That's good. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of this is also for those tryhards. Like you guys know, we use the word "that guy." What we're talking about is them tryhards.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when we were in the military, where it's like, why is this even a rule? It's because somebody's done somebody's done something stupid. Yes.
Like for example, I think one of the things is like playing by intent is something they outlined too, and
yes,
they kind of want witnesses to intent, right? Because how many times have we seen? Not throw Team Happy under the bus again. A person say, yeah, let's do it that way. And then right when they needed it not to be done that way, they stopped doing it that way and win the game, and everyone saw it live, and then somebody got a ban for a year. You know what I'm saying? Like, because no one's actually breaking rules, right? So, hey, we're going to do this thing. This is how we're going to do it. Agreed. Guy over here agreed. Got it. Let's do it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's
a try hard protection.
Just going into like intent, it's like there's a thing in the game state section where it says like players must announce their intent when rolling dice and apply the outcome. Their opponent is responsible for listening. Any dice rolled without announced intent may be ruled as void by a present judge, and the player must re-roll it. So if I say like 3s to hit, re-rolling 1s, and I throw those dice, and then after I've thrown them, I'm like, oh, actually, my rule says like I can roll all hits. Well, like that whole roll is now like void. You might have to redo the whole thing.
I'm actually going to go into the chat for a second because this is a good one. We normally don't pull out a chat for this segment, but I say Archimedes. He's like, yeah, it seems somewhat counterintuitive to a war game to explain your main tactics to them. Is it then bad sportsmanship when they react to that, and you have to use other surprises to win? It's not. I think you're misinterpreting what angle shooting is. This isn't like, this is what my whole plan of attack is. This is what I'm going to try to do. I'm not going to sit here and walk you through my army list of all my little interactions, all my combos, all my wombo combos, nothing like that. It's literally my man asked me a question and I omitted truth from him. Right. That's angle shooting.
And you don't have to lay out your intent of all 3 of your turns at the start of your movement phase, right? It's just like, if I move these guys into a building and I place models, you say like, my intent is that none of these guys are touching a wall. So you can't fight them through a wall. You actually have to charge through it. right? Or like my intent is to place these guys where they're not sitting in an open window so you can see them, right? And then like you go through the turns. And then on top of that, it's not so much like you're trying to play these like gotcha fish things, right? But there are some interactions that only activate once something else has happened, like stratagems, where it's like the stratagem activates when the enemy player casts a psychic power. Now you can play a stratagem, right? That's like your trap card. And that's well within the bounds, right? But if it's like, if somebody asks you if you can do something and you give a lie of omission.
Yeah. If I'm moving Mortarion up to this objective, I'm like, I really want to be here. And then I look around, I'm like, can anyone have range to deny their wish from me? And I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, 24 inches, everything looks good. And then I stop for a second. I look at Mike and I'm like, do you have a stratagem that extends the range of you deny the witch on anybody? Just off the cuff, just because I'm trying to do this thing. And you're like, I do. And I'm like, cool, man, thanks. And I just like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. Or I say, you know what? I got to risk it. Like, that is the situation.
Yeah, because like there is some aspect of that game that's well within like the intent of the game and fair, because like that's why they have those things, right? Where it's like we have transhuman physiology where it only activates when a unit is targeted as an attack, right? So that's like they know that you have that trap card and it's up to you as when to play it, right? But it's also up to you at the start of the game to tell them like any type of gotcha things that would cause feel bads, right? Where it's like I play Alpha Legion with my Lord of Skulls units, and I tell them, I'm like, hey, you may never have seen these because they're not a super popular unit, but they are not Night Titans. They are in fact a Chaos Space Marine unit. They can use Chaos Space Marine stratagems, and Alpha Legion has ambush. So when you come in within 18 inches of any Alpha Legion unit, including my Lord of Skulls,
and normally you might not even bring it up because that's a standard stratagem a lot of people have, but you're going to bring it up because you're not used to seeing it applied to a model as big as a house.
Especially if somebody's like, oh, you have Lord of Skulls, I'm going to outflank these Eradicators because I don't want them to die turn one, and I need them to try to kill your Lord of Skulls. Be like, okay, just so you're aware, like if they come in within 18 inches of me, I can shoot them.
Because you already innately know that this is a thing that they're not, that's totally strange and a weird interaction that you want to make sure is out in the open so they can make informed decisions.
And the additional thing, and this also is from the chat, like people are saying that this is warfare. It's not warfare. It's a game.
Yeah.
It's a game that has so many rules that no one person can possibly know what every single army does. And by the time you do, a new codex will come out, right? And so what we're saying is that if your codex just came out yesterday and nobody knows anything, and you have a unit that goes, look, man, this auto kills any unit that is under 10 people. Like I have a rule that lets me do that. You don't hold that until you wipe out a guy's unit. Right? You disclose that at the beginning of the game. You just go, hey man, I have a unit that if it touches you will auto kill your unit if it has less than 10 guys in it.
Yeah, because that's such a hot thing. It's up to you to understand like what are the things. And so like there is a degree of personal, decision making here. Like you get to deliberate on like, you don't have to disclose every fucking rule in your codex. You don't have to sit there and say, I've always on my stratagems. You have to answer questions when asked, and probably figure out the ones that you've already observed have made people tilt triggered because you didn't over the course of you playing your army, and now just make that adjustment as you move forward. You're like, you know what? For some reason, like doing this ambush on this model, this really gets people mad. So I think it really is like, it makes them feel bad. Like they feel like I did something to them. You know what? This auto kill 10 guys one that I've been doing on people, I'm going to tell people about this one because like I'm starting to get a bad rap around here. People start to think I'm an asshole, or you just are an asshole and you never have that conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
But that goes to like what we were talking about on what kind of win do you want to get? Do you want to win because you played better? Or won better or had better die rolls? Or do you want to win because your opponent didn't know about a special rule you had? That's the difference, right?
I mean, like, it just goes into the intent of the game. Like this isn't like a military war game where you don't know the enemy troop movements or like any of that other stuff. It's a game, right? Like you don't have to give them your playbook,
fog of war.
You still have to like play fair. Like it's a game that you play with your buddies.
And this is a good thing. And I think most people are vastly taking this for what it is and that it's good. And some people think it's kind of weird, but let me tell you, man, like if you haven't been, partaking in this journey over the last decade of moving into a more competitive esports style, win-loss binary bracket style competition, a major community complaint has been the absence of sportsmanship, right? Because that's inevitably what occurs when we go to a win-loss metric and wins matter, and we're trying to be very on the books competitive with our scoring. So now that there's no weighted score or policed score that a player feels like is, they have a shield against this, we have this now. And this has been a long time coming. This is listening to the community. This is listening to, and it's not everyone in the community even felt this way or even had an experience like this. This is enough people, however, have been like, man, like Haspil, like the sportsmanship shit, it's gone. I don't like it. We've got punitive measures, 20-point reductions. We've got a little rule that says you can't fucking lie to me in the face. Like, this is
answer all my questions.
Like literally it's like, this is really good. This is as close to like weighted hobby scores as you can get, without weighting the hobby scores. Cause it's like deductionable. And this is only a few of these things. A lot of these things are just like, don't roll dice like an asshole, right? If you roll a bunch of dice without saying what you're doing, they don't count. Now there's a rule for that.
That just makes sense.
How many times have you played somebody who was like, oh, 3 hits? You're like, what the fuck are you even rolling over there?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's part of it. I mean, like, that's something we've talked about before. Kenny and I, in our tactics class and here, is that like, you just need to kind of get into the habit of just like, say what you're doing as you do it. Mm-hmm. And even if it's like, the person you're playing, like, it could be Sean Naden and he knows fucking everything about 40K, right?
Yeah.
Like, still, it's good sportsmanship. It's just like good gentlemanliness to just be like, hey, I need 3s to hit, and I can reroll once, and then you roll your dice, right? And just go about it. It's not that hard.
Yeah. There's that personal, like, you figure out the tempo of the game you're in, be a fucking functioning brained human, figure out the tempo and what and how we're going to play, because every game of 40K is unique and different, and no two will ever be repeated in the history of all games ever played. They're all unique, singularly, like, encapsulated universes. And so each game is different, and they have different rules. Even the way when me and Wyatt play and we start doing that tempo he just described, we're not even really playing the same game that these guys over here are playing anymore. And that's the beauty of this war game. And somebody in chat, which I agree with, like, a lot of what he says. Like, I always, I think it's Deuce on YouTube says, I always tell people about the popular strats I use, things to watch out for, but I'm not going to help you beat me. That's where I draw the line. Yeah, that's where I also personally draw the line.
Right.
Yeah, right. Like, I am like, these are the hot takes. These are what I know to be the hotness. I will give him all the information in real time to you right now. But then, like, once we start the game, I'm not going to like constantly keep reminding you of the things I already walked you through, because that's my line. Like, right. Because now I do need you to make some fucking mistakes so I can win.
Yeah. And we have guys in the chat that are like, hey, they're fairly new, and to know they don't know their own rules, right? Well, it's like, concentrate on knowing your own rules.
That's your responsibility.
I mean,
that's controllable.
Like, I say the same thing. It's just like, it's impossible to know everything, right? So just know what you can control, right? If I'm playing Grey Knights, right? I'm going to make sure that I'm on my Grey Knight game. And then after that, you can start to like pick up some things here and there. And that also comes with like experience. So if you're new to anything, it's going to take you a while to like get used to things. So it's like, when I first started playing tournaments as like a 13, 14-year-old, there was so many things I didn't know. And I lost a lot of games, but I also learned a lot real fast. And that's just part of it, right? And that's the thing. You can learn that and you're playing with your buddies and you pick things up, or you can dive in feet first into a tournament and just be like, I'm going to learn stuff real fast, because you're
going to learn today.
Yeah, you're going to learn today. But, we talk about it from time to time. I mean, like, I have trouble maintaining my own body of rules, but I care so much about being a good sport that, like, I have, game aids. Rob loves his game aids. It's
Love
like,
game aids.
Why would I try to remember something when I could just read it word for word for you? So I have cards and I have printouts and things like that. And that way it's like everything is clear and concise, and there's no like, well, I think it does this, but let's look it up and like waste all this time. No, I'm just going to read it for you.
And when you get into the habit, like going back to the dice roll stuff, when you get into the habit of like narrating the game, you know what I mean? Like self-narrating, like, hey, I need 3s to hit, I'm going to need 4s to wound or whatever. That helps speed the game up. Because maybe you're shooting at me and you didn't realize something, and I'll be like, nah, man, you don't need 4s to wound. You need 3s. or you need 5s, right? If I know what you're rolling for, I can help you.
That's a great point. And also, it would help you memorize your own rules faster because it's like a second degree of memorization that you're doing. That's just good in general, man. Somebody in chat, Baz Ruskin, I like what he says because he plays Black Templar. They have a straight up gotcha bit strat. Their key strat Devout, which is like essentially I get to pile in.
Yeah, it lets you basically do a heroic intervention on your turn and fight.
Yeah. So it's gotcha bitchy by design because like people don't realize like wait, you mean like you can do this, get out, and if you just happen to be within like 3.1 inches of me, you can now do Devout and move again, but that counts as a pile in. Now you're engaged raids and we can fight. Like, so he says that he takes a lot of time to explain it before the game, like what it does. But he won't remind them again during the game because like it does rely on them kind of forgetting about it and not thinking about it every time. Because if you just kept saying, "Hey, I can Devout here, I can Devout there," that's not what they're saying. Yeah. That's not. You're not a bad sport if you like in those circumstances. Like, it's and you're not necessarily even like you're not even angle shooting if you don't tell them ever about it until they ask. You're not even a bad sport. It's just you're not a good sport. You know what I'm saying? You're not like, so like he's a good sport because he says, "Hey man, Devout, this shit gets people mad." Let me tell you about it.
Yeah. So I tell people about ambush because it's just like they don't expect, like most people aren't used to seeing certain units too, like certain factions, certain units. There's just like, you probably haven't seen a Lord of Skulls.
You're not used to a fucking super heavy monster taking advantage of a Alpha Legion stratagem.
Yeah, like if a unit is really rare, like ask a bunch of questions. Like our friends over at Dice Check, like Matt loves his what is it, the Hierophant, the flying thingy?
Harridan.
Yeah, Harridan. And like nobody plays the Harridan, but it can do some wacky shit. And you're just like, wait. It can do what?
It can damage itself.
Never see one.
To do more. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the most. I mean that's a lot of community interaction. We usually don't do a lot of Q&A if you're listening to the podcast and you're to work during this section of the podcast. But this was such a solid like pregame show we did on this subject. We had a lot of great community interaction, and then again some more people I think who just kicked in. So that's why you heard so many roll calls during this. But yeah, man, I think that was really well laid out, guys.
Absolutely.
Are there any more like absolutes that we have to cover before we jump out of here?
Not particularly. I mean, like there's small things. So again, like I recommend you go check it out. Go over to Frontline Gaming and read it. I also posted in the chat for anybody watching, so you can click directly to that Google Doc. Just like little things. Like there's now a stipulation where if you touch a model to move it, it's activated. You got to move it. You can't like move it forward and then move it back and that sort of deal. Like you gotta, like when you move it, it's moved.
It takes you backsies.
There's like some dice things like, if you show up with some janky ass dice, you may be asked to not use them and you have to comply.
I like that. That's one of my pet peeves is like people moving their whole army up and then trying to like remove it all or unwind it.
I don't actually, I mean, I've done that too. Like, it's just something that like, unless you're like really at a high level of competition, you don't think about as being something that kind of affects the game, but it does. Like when you move a model somewhere, it's actually kind of impossible to put it exactly back where it was unless you place some tokens or something beforehand.
Yeah.
So that's just one of those things.
That's why
when you move it,
I do all my visualization. If I feel like it's about to be like something I'm not sure I can pull off, I do all my visualization with like dice. I put a dice here, I put a dice there, then I move around and I'm like, I don't think I can do it. I even make the frame of the dice representing their base and kind of move it up there to see if I can get what I want. So that's one of my pet peeves is like the sloppiness.
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of these are, other than like sportsmanship stuff, a lot of these more like way out in the weeds type of like minutia is guidelines rather than like ironclad rulings. And it's mostly there for, it's like, okay, so like we're here, like you go into every game with the assumption that like we're going to play a gentlemanly game. We're going to play to the spirit of 40K and play a fair game. And then like, if I'm playing Kenny at a GT and I notice him doing a lot of like moving forward and moving back and a lot of like him and Han with his movement phase over a couple of turns, I might be like, hey man, you just need to like abide by this rule now because it's like kind of janky what you've been doing. But most of the time it's like it's cool. Like, it's not going to be that big of a deal.
And somebody in the chat asked some examples of janky dice. A really good example is like the Gene Stealer dice that they had come out with. Basically dice that are hard to read, that if your opponent has an issue being able to read the dice. The old Adeptus Sororitas dice had some problems with that because they were hard to read at a distance. The new Adeptus Sororitas dice has a different problem. They have a big fleur-de-lis on one side and the Adeptus symbol on the other. So which one's the
Oh my God, that's so dumb.
Right?
Yeah.
Whichever one you want it to be.
In this doc, there is a whole section on tools. It goes into that whole thing and basically just says like, players coming to the table do so with a reasonable expectation to be able to clearly read and understand their opponent's dice. A player with non-standard dice, wherein each facing is not either a number or a number of pips corresponding to the numbers 1 through 6, or otherwise non-standard D6, may be required by their opponent to use standard dice for that game. This requirement can only be enforced before the game begins. To this end, both players must make their opponent aware of any non-standard dice they are using prior to the game beginning. If they fail to do so, they have committed a foul. So if you roll up with like just a really prolific example, because they're used everywhere, is club dice. Like we have long war dice, other clubs have dice with like the 6 being their like gaming club symbol or their team symbol or a brand or something like that, right? Generally referred to as club dice. Now, if we go up to a table and I'm just like, oh, you're using like club dice, those are non-standard. Well, I don't like those. Please do not use those. Or maybe you have GW dice. Like GW dice are notorious for either being like good or terrible. Like I'm going to use these custodian dice, and the 1 is a symbol and the 6 is a symbol, and they're both a variation of the capital I that they use for either the Sigil of Malcador or the Inquisition. Yeah. And it's impossible to tell if it's a 1 or a 6. So please don't use those. And this has been a thing for a little while. It's not been like a huge deal, but like some tournaments have in the past been like, okay, very draconian, you have to use dice that we provide. Like the top 16 of LVO, or back in the day, there was like, get you a cup, scoop up a bunch of dice out of this huge bucket. That's what you can use. Or in the more recent past, places like Slaughterfest, where they're like, if you want to use non-standard dice, we have to be able to see them. And we're going to ask you to dump your dice bag, and we'll tell you which ones you can and can't use. And typically the ones they would throw out are ones that are hard to read, things like Games Workshop dice with weird things where it's like, I might have the 2014 Ultramarines dice where the symbol is on the 6. And then like the 2018 version of Ultramarines dice have the symbol on the 1 for some weird reason, but they're all mixed up together, right?
Yeah, but also it says like, if you don't tell your opponent before the game starts, you're in trouble. If you have club dice.
Yeah, like, so just by default, if you have non-standard dice, i.e. not a number, not a pip, so all club dice, if they have a symbol, and you don't tell me before the beginning of the game, that's a foul.
Yeah. Got to put that in my memory banks. I mean, that's
super simple. I mean, you usually do anyway. You pull them out and you go, hey, the Blood Raven symbol on this is the 6. Yeah. That's all it is.
Yeah. Every time I've ever played against somebody that wacky with dice like that, they always
somebody brought up the GW Nurgle dice. That's a good example of
I like the Squig dice. Like there are people I've seen try to play the Squig dice. If you see somebody who's trying to play the Squig dice, like, hey man, more power to you. I love the moto of the orcness, but like you're not fucking using those dice.
Yeah, and the Death Guard dice, I wanted to so bad because I love how they're like a little gooey thing inside of a hard container. I was like, this is so useless.
Yeah, you can't even use them as counters because you're like, is that a 3 or a 4 or 5? What is that?
So dumb. Oh, anyway, well, that was good coverage. I think we did it, Rob.
Haspil, take us out of here.
To a New Yorker like you, a hero is some kind of sandwich, not some nut that takes on 3 tigers.